boothcoaching.com. I'm going to talk about guilt and shame. There's a lot of discussion, generally speaking, in Sunday school class and the like around guilt and shame. And Brown talks about it quite a bit. Her thoughts, I think, are super, super good. And I've followed her for years, and she talks about wholeheartedness as the antidote to guilt and shame. And I'm going to talk about how these two emotions show up in a mixed faith marriage, how these two concepts play out. So I coach, just as some background, I coach about half believing spouses and about half non-believing spouses in my practice. And almost invariably, we talk about guilt and shame. I see it with most post-Mormons. They express so much relief that they're able to let go of a lot of the guilt and shame they've carried over the years. And then they just bring it right back up and they tell me about all the guilt and shame they're experiencing over hurting their spouse or hurting their family. It's like peeling an onion. There's always another layer. Believing spouses have their own version of guilt and shame. I see it often, for instance, in the context of a believing husband. He often feels guilty about not being the leader that could have prevented the loss of faith in his spouse. Whether it's the husband or the wife, I see guilt and shame around, what they could have done to prevent this, what they could have done to be better or more righteous that could have averted the faith transition. It's a perfect shame/guilt storm. And I want to share some of my own thoughts on this from my own experience in my mixed faith marriage and from my experience working with my clients on why I think guilt and shame aren't very helpful. Okay, guilt and shame, they're complex, they pop up in many situations, but the bottom line for me is that they rarely help reach our goals or create the type of relationships that we want to create. They just rarely do. And the reason is because guilt and shame are terrible motivators. They don't motivate us to act in the ways we need to act in order to create the types of marriages we want to create. Guilt, we'll just look at them one at a time. Guilt does not inspire or motivate. It drags us down and it creates a window for self-loathing. Now, yes, I know it can be helpful to recognize when we've made unhelpful choices, but a lot of times with guilt, we dwell in that space. And dwelling in guilt does not help anybody. It does not help us show up as motivated and loving. When I feel guilty, I tend to withdraw. I tend to become defensive, neither of which help at all in my marriage. Likewise, shame is a terrible, terrible motivator. It creates secrecy, hiding, more self-loathing. What most marriages need, especially mixed, we need partners willing to show up and do hard things, have hard conversation, reach out when it's scary, offer love and understanding when that's not necessarily what we're getting in return. Guilt and shame stand in the way of those things. Self-loathing does not create vulnerability or courage. It just doesn't. What creates motivation and what will help us show up when it's hard and help us show up when it's scary are completely different emotions. Think of emotions like love, willingness, commitment, and courage. Those emotions are so much more compelling and motivating than guilt and shame. Like, think about your kids. Like, when has the guilt trip ever really helped them be better? Never. And it's the same for us. It's the same for you. A guilt trip never ever helps. You already know you messed up or did something. Your nose in it. Think about with our kids too. When does shame help our kids be more loving, more kind, more generous? It doesn't. Only love and compassion help us be more loving, more kind, more generous. So if you're in a mixed faith marriage, like, I strongly suggest learning how to set guilt and shame aside, learning how to process them and move beyond them instead of getting stuck in the perpetual cycle of guilt and shame. I've seen people where we're stuck in that cycle for years. just years. You need to be able to step out of that cycle and move on to different emotions. Emotions like generosity, acceptance, courage, commitment, love. Because we get completely different results from those emotions. These emotions create the motivation that you need to make the changes that need to be made in your marriage. So if you notice, this is sort of a pro tip I'll give you. If you notice that you repeat a lot of conversations in your mixed faith marriage, and those conversations end up in hurt and frustration and pain, it's probably because those conversations are fueled by guilt and shame. So then you have defensiveness and withdrawing and hiding and avoiding and all of those things that don't help us create the type of marriages we want. If those conversations were filled with love and commitment, you wouldn't keep ending up in pain and hurt. It just doesn't work that way. All right, if you found this helpful, you want some help for your mixed faith marriage, I am here to help. I'm starting a 12-week group intensive in the first part of 2022 in February. If you want to be part of that group, and you probably do, you need to reach out to me, message me, go onto my website, brookeboothcoaching.com, sign up for a free call with me. I want to hear your story. I want to hear where you're at. Together we can see if coaching is a good fit for you and see if you want to be one of the people starting 2022 on the right foot, cleaning up your marriages, your mixed faith marriages, making them stronger and better. This is an investment of a lifetime. The work we do, the investments we make in our marriages, the dividends are tenfold. So now is the time to reach out to me and get on that list to be part of the group in February. Go to brookeboothcoaching.com and sign up for a free call, or you can just message me if that's easier for you. All right, wishing you the very, very best.